Welcome back to Awkward Conversations. We are pressing forward with our crucial discussion on the preventing substance misuse among student athletes and beyond. In the studio with us again, we have retired NFL star Ryan Grant and Donald Hooton Jr., president of the Taylor Hooton Foundation.
So one of the things that I think we'd like to talk about is a study that came out of the Journal of Adolescent Health, where 80% of young people who are using anabolic steroids were using them to make them feel better about their appearance. And again, you, Don, had brought this up, that there's so many young people looking to, feel better about their appearance, enhance their self-esteem.
Certainly, because when most people talk about this topic of performance-enhancing drugs, which here at the Taylor Hooton Foundation we now call appearance and performance-enhancing substances, their mind immediately goes to an athlete. And we know most people, whether it's young people or even adults, are using these drugs and these substances to change their appearance. They're not happy with their body. We've all been there. We've looked in the mirror. We're not happy with what's looking back at us. And as humans, and we can't fault ourselves for that, we're looking for the quick fix. And whether it's a drug or a substance or a dietary supplement, that is why they're turning to these drugs to change their physical appearance. And if you would have talked to my brother Taylor, he felt the same way. Sure, did he want to compete in athletics? Yes, but if you took a look at how his body developed and he puts on this 30 pounds of muscle and loses body fat, you've got to feel good about yourself. But at what point do you stop? At what point do you feel healthy about yourself? And that's what's really driving this behavior.
Well, and so much of body image dysphoria and body image issue is the fact that the reality is not reflected, right? So what they actually look like, which is probably young, normal, healthy, body appearance. And even if it's not, it's still the dysmorphia and the exaggeration in their mind of what it is, what the problem is, and that they can only focus on that. And I think people really need to understand that they'll look at you and go, oh, you look this, you look fine, you should be this. And when you see yourself in the mirror and what is reflected back at you is not an accurate depiction in your mind, it's a huge struggle for young people. And again, we talking about people that use this who aren't athletes. The images that we are shown, both male and female bodies, just human bodies in general, so much of what we see is so heavily edited and curated and fixed and adjusted that we have not been used to seeing what a real human body looks like. And it's full of imperfections and things that aren't always, at their best. And that's okay. I tell my girls all the time, you have one body. This is it. You got to make peace with it, because this is the one that you got for the ride, and there might be some things about it that aren't great or you don't like or whatever, but how do you work with them instead of combating against it? And that body dysmorphia and body image issue is so important to talk about.
Especially as young people, they're very impressionable. And when we turn the TV on or you get on social media and all you see is people in bathing suits and this ripped body, and it's like, again, like you said, that's not really what everybody's body looks like, but that's just an impression we get.
Right. And, things like the flat tummy teas and and you're looking at her and you're like, the tea didn't do it. The tea, it was the food, it was the working out, it was, potential surgical enhancements. It was all sorts of things. And I know I tell my kids that all the time. I'm like, what you see is not the real person. And it's hard for them because they go, but that's what's on, that's the picture. But that's and you're like, yeah, but pictures are not necessarily the reality of it anymore. And trying to find that self-acceptance and find things outside of physicality that they can be appreciative of and celebrate about themselves that aren't just based on what they look like. And, talking about student athletes and so many of the things that impact them, student athletes are also a pretty vulnerable group when it comes to opioid misuse. And today we're thrilled to introduce a new voice to the conversation. He's a former college athlete, founder of Physio Project HQ, and a renowned physical therapist dedicated to promoting healthy athletics. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Averill Sutchar.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us for the second part of this episode.
Yeah, so I graduated 2012 from Creighton University, did my doctorate there. Been a physical therapist since, and right now practice in Scottsdale. I run a big, giant sports clinic. And about 3 years ago, my business partner, Aaron Bauer, and we kind of looked at how we were approaching things, and we were saying, how do we affect the most people, take what we do, working with elite athletes. How do we give that to the masses? So we founded Physio Project HQ, and we work on the back end with coaches, and we're able to essentially look at their programming and see where the stress points are with their athletes and basically keep them on that platform.
I know we've been talking a lot about anabolic steroids and performance enhancing drugs, but what are the underlying factors that contribute to the susceptibility of athletes, young athletes with opioids as well?
I think you're just looking at who's your target audience. I mean, an athlete in general is willing to do whatever it takes. Now, that's not all athletes. You know, Ryan talked about this healthy culture, but really at the end of the day, is it takes a village with these athletes. They need folks around them. They're going to guide them in the right direction, because in general, the things that make them great can also be their vices. So risks that they're willing to take, things that they're willing to do, you know, run full speed into another grown human being. So you got to realize you're not just saying that's good and bad, because good and bad is blurred in that population.
Right. Right. You're definitely dealing with people who are willing to test themselves physically, mentally, keep pushing, but it's important to also remind them of what those limits are. And opioid use among young people is, you know, opioids are another thing that can take that pain away. If you've injured yourself as an athlete, I think a lot of young people think that they can start taking opioids and that it will just, they won't feel it anymore. And I mean, the long-term implications of that are really, really detrimental to their health. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you see as some of the potential long-term health effects and risks are with young people?
Absolutely. The biggest thing is surgery. It's not like in the 90s where pharmaceuticals were able to tell emergency docs, hey, if you didn't prescribe your X amount of Oxycontin, we're going to get rid of you. They don't have that pull anymore. I mean, if you have an athlete in-house and they had a surgery, they're getting a few pills. It's not, I remember when I was playing football in college, I had my wisdom teeth taken out. I think the guy gave me 2 months full of Vicodin, right? And there's stories past
Right.
that of what happened
Right.
with that Vicodin, right? So that's the biggest red flag. If you have an athlete who's had surgery, that's where that athlete finds or is, I guess, susceptible and is introduced to that type of medication, right? So that's the biggest thing. So being aware of how are they tolerating pain, how do they understand what their pain is telling them, and guiding them along on like what's normal, you know, what's not normal. Do we need to? Is it controlled? And if it's not, what are the steps to control that pain? I think the biggest thing is understanding our team and everybody staying in their scope. So for me as a physical therapist, we have countless science-based tools of how we can affect pain and function, right? The problem lies in we can't measure that, and nobody can. And if you figured out how to measure that, you need to write a book about it because you'll be a trillionaire, right? We have no way of doing that. So we have all these different ways to say what my pain experience is such a subjective experience. And I say I've never had a sprained ankle in my life. I have nothing to reason about. Is this normal? Is this normal pain? What's it going to look like in 2 weeks? Whereas, you know, you take a OG who's about to retire, they've had countless injuries and surgeries. They understand, you know, how bad is this? They have timelines in their brain. So I think that's one of the biggest things to realize off the bat.
As a parent, obviously, you know, wanting your child to be successful in their athletics and to continue on with this, it may continue through college if they're incredibly talented, even beyond. What should parents be looking for if they feel that, you know, maybe their kids are being pressured by either doctors or by coaches? What are some of the things that parents can look for and really know that they're making the right decision for their student athlete in regards to, you know, potential surgery?
Yeah, it's a great question. Mostly because if you look at an athlete and the team they build around them, they tend to have this blind trust in our medical system. They don't ask any questions. It's like, doc, whatever you say, whatever you do, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to get back as soon as I can, because they almost look at it like it's their responsibility to their teammates and friends and so forth, right? And that's usually what their identity is. I mean, the biggest thing is you have to have a
Right.
team around that athlete that the parents can trust and they can absolutely communicate with. I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting down and my evaluation with my athlete is not about the kid. It's about the parent. They got to understand, you know, what's going on here. What's the disease or pathology? What are our options? What's the good, better, best scenario? And guess what? Let's get everybody else involved here. You know, let's talk to the folks that, you know, if we fail level 1, we're failing level, then we jump to level 2. The last thing we want to do with our athletes is push them towards a high level type of treatment and fail down. You know, we always want to fail up. You know, you want to do the most conservative thing before you jump towards something that inherently will have a lot more risk.
Yeah, I think it's important for parents to, kind of put the whole of their child's life into context in these situations. And so, is the risk to their child's health to kind of force this or really, speed up this healing process going to really serve their child in the long run? What's the likelihood that most children are going to end up kind of in the professional leagues, and kind of balance that decision making, around these issues? I think that also, it's really important for parents to think about the mental health aspect when their child's also been taken out of the game too, and kind of, introduce supports to kind of help their child move through that. Their child's identity might be highly rooted in some of these sports activities. It's something they do to feel good, and now all of a sudden they don't have it. And so when when you put together the potential for opioid use, the pain, and the lack of support there, like parents really, can be really thoughtful about making sure that all of those kind of needs are met overall.
I think it's more of we're operating on these outliers, right? So we're looking at these athletes and we're saying, our examples are these NFL All-Pro Olympic folks. And the reality is it's such an impossible thing to think about. Even if you've hit the genetic lottery, your parents were good athletes. The odds of you getting to that top level is so astronomically small. We want to create a safe, effective environment for our kids to, not everybody's going to succeed, and that's part of the learning experience of sports. That losing is just as part as winning, but being able to let them compete, explore, find out what they're good at. So I think it's important also to understand that with the parents, that they can foster that environment for them and basically lean on their team where they don't have that expertise. For a parent to make that decision for their athlete is just as ludicrous as me telling you, hey, this is how we're going to do brain surgery on you. I took a neuroanatomy class once in undergrad. It just doesn't add up.
Yeah, don't do that, please. Please don't do that.
Saving lives means staying informed. Knowing the dangers of using fake prescription pills can help those you care about and keep our community safe. As a parent, educator, neighbor, or friend, we all play a role in building safe and healthy futures for ourselves and our loved ones. Do your part to take the first step today. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com to access education, prevention, and treatment resources. Fake prescription pills laced with fentanyl are deadly. Be their protector. Be informed. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com.
Only around 5%, a little more than 5% of high school athletes go on to play college sports. And then, again, the numbers from college to professional sports organizations are often even smaller. So, there are so many kids that play sports and so many kids that are involved in athletic activities. I think it's really important also for parents to manage their expectations of what their child is capable of and why their child is playing sports in the first place. The first thing is, teamwork and camaraderie and positive self-esteem and learning how to do new challenging things and all of that. And I think most parents need to kind of check themselves and go, this is not this is not the thing I can want for my kids more than they want. This is not the thing that I can push my kids to do beyond their comfort zone. And, we see parents do that a lot of times, living vicariously through their kids. But in student athletics, it's so important because these kids are putting their bodies on the line. And I think parents need to be really, really cognizant of, look, what are the chances that my child is going to do this professionally? And even if they are, the long-term effects of what these parents and these coaches, again, we saw a great example of what a supportive a cast and family can look like to an athlete, with Ryan. And I think it's important to always remember, the expectation of what I have and what I think my kid is going to do. What is my actual child capable of? And how can I support them to be the best at that without, putting their body or their mental health on the line in order to maybe achieve something that, might not be in the cards for them anyway, which is okay. I think sports are great. They don't have to be professionals.
So Averill, can you tell us about some practical solutions that parents can keep in mind for supporting their kids with this type of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is you're leaning on your not your staff, but your whole team for the things that you're not a pro at, right? So your physical therapist, when they come to something that's not in their scope, they're going to refer them out to, if it's an emergency, they're referring them out to an emergency room, or they're referring out to an orthopedic specialist or an internist. So the understanding that everyone has their scope in the medical world, and the dangers are when someone tries to operate outside of those scopes. I mean, the biggest thing is we're also trying to avoid surgery. Unfortunately, in the sports world, that can be unavoidable, right? You have someone who has a neck injury and they have an unstable fracture in their neck. Someone's going to hopefully save their life, right? So but there's this gray area where we have in the athletic world where is it surgery, is it not? And then a lot of times you'll see these collaborations where it's, well, what's the kid's goal? And so there's a lot of times that's not a black and white answer. And I think most people, when they hear that totally sets the light bulb off. We don't usually think of that. It's torn, it's surgery, and when you actually dive into that research, it's not that clear. And as far as pain management, I mean, it's the most layered thing that we do not understand very well. And again, it's one of those things where if someone tells you they do understand it, you ask them for their book, because nobody really does. There's certain components, and if you look at it, I mean, there's a bio, a psycho, and a social aspect of pain, and those things are interact, and that you can't have one without the other. And there has to be a good team behind that. And if the parents can understand that, I know they have their best, intentions for their kids, but when you get to the point where, hey, as a parent, you're not comfortable making that decision, which is 100% okay. I could tell you, doing this for about 11 years, I can't tell you, I send out dozens of people every month where I'm like, I need help with you. And the worst thing I could do for that athlete, that patient, that patient's parent is say, I can figure this out. Let's see what happens. That's a dangerous situation. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying the parents just have to realize that they have a lot of tools at their disposal, and those people are at the front lines willing to help.
I think introducing the idea there are opioid supports for these types of things, and it's a really important conversation to have with your child's doctor. Our doctors that I work with, I'm not a doctor, so no one should take my medical advice, always to be able to talk with folks who are knowledgeable about this and know your child pretty well. The thing that can be really vulnerable for young people is, again, that their brains haven't fully developed. So they have an injury. Now they're taking an opioid, and that's being introduced into their kind of, their brain chemistry and their brain system. And so, they might not feel like they need that substance to cope with life before surgery, but now their brain is kind of getting used to that. And it's harder, it makes them more susceptible to addiction just where they are developmentally. So really important to think about why that's a special consideration when you're talking about a young person using an opioid. And again, to talk to your child's providers about what are the alternatives to this, and are there ways that we can avoid introducing this to their system. We also know that it's really important to take their pain incredibly seriously, because young people whose pain is not treated well are also at higher risk for seeking out other substances, whether it be opioids or other things, to treat kind of their pain overall. And so I don't think the message here that anyone wants to give is, don't treat their pain, but be very intentional about how you treat their pain, and be very intentional about how you support them in kind of healing.
Absolutely. And also remembering that, so many opioids, particularly now with the stronger acting ones, I mean, within 7 days, your body chemistry changes so drastically, and, young people whose frontal lobes aren't developed and all these things, it has even more of an impact. And, constantly trying to delay the age of first use of any types of substances to at least 25, when hopefully the frontal lobe is completely developed, it really does give them a much better chance to avoid addiction and avoid misuse. Averill, thank you so much for joining us today. You have provided us with a lot of really great information. We really appreciate it. So thanks so much for joining us on Awkward Conversations today.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys having me.
Don, can you tell us a little bit about what the Taylor Hooton Foundation is, and what some of the resources and things are that you guys provide to families?
Absolutely. So the main thing is we have our website, like everybody else, that is loaded with resources. And I know there's probably some parents or even young people out there asking the question, well, I really don't know much about this topic. How do I start that conversation? We have pages dedicated to that. We also have a podcast as well. It's called the All Me Podcast. We're on all major platforms, and we talk everything appearance and performance enhancing substance, including nutrition and all the different questions we get about is creatine good and protein good and what have you, as well as our All Me assembly program. programs where we go out into communities across the United States, Canada, and Latin America and deliver this program in person to young people so that we can be interactive, and we try to deliver the message in a way that is very impactful to the young people, so it's something that they remember and can take with them as they move forward into adolescence and adulthood.
Thanks so much, Don, for sharing that. For folks who are listening, all of that information is located in the show notes below.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been such an important voice in this. What is going on next for you? What are some of the great projects?
What am I doing? Being a dad.
Right.
No, I'm actually, I have a podcast that I'm very proud. I guess I'm proud of it.
Yeah, be proud of it. Yeah,
we just started it, but it is. I'm enthusiastic about it, and that's a real big thing.
What's
it's
it called?
Profits in Process.
Okay.
And it's an introspective podcast where we sit with individuals and we talk about the value in process, whether it's the micro aspect of your process or the macro, and because it's something that I kind of live by, where I am constantly trying to bring myself in and out of awareness of my process and then engage back in my process to find value. Because I think a lot of times, we get so caught up on end game.
Right.
And this is what we talk about, where we're not comfortable with what is.
With what is, right.
Right now and what we're doing, because we're thinking about either comparing it to something else or in relation to where it should be.
Right.
And without finding the value, like that's why we are here.
Right.
To actually experience and to be in our process. And so I sit with individuals who are super cool on all around, because everybody has a phenomenal perspective. Even if they don't, that's what makes it phenomenal.
Yeah, no, I love that. What a beautiful topic for a podcast. Really interesting.
To find value in process.
Great.
Which is
Profits in process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be present in the process. Yeah. Absolutely.
We are out of time, everyone, but please join us next week for another awkward conversation. I want to warn you up front, today's episode is profoundly emotional and incredibly difficult, and we are talking about a parent's worst nightmare, which is the loss of a child. When surveyed, 10% of parents were the ones to say that they thought maybe their kids had tried drugs within the past year, and it was 40% of teens that reported that they had.
She had succumbed to fentanyl after being clean for 2.5 years.
So we get a lot of people just coming kind of to see the DEA museum. First thing they see is these pictures, and I talk to people and I tell them, like, this could be your child. These pictures were taken on the best day of these people's lives sometimes.
Make sure to check out getsmartaboutdrugs.com. Parents, caregivers, you can find so many resources of great information there about how to talk to your kids and make these conversations a little less awkward. A huge thank you to the Elks DAP, which is the largest all-volunteer nationwide drug awareness program, and also a huge thanks to the DEA for their outreach program and for making this possible.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Awkward Conversation series are solely those of the individuals, speakers, commentators, experts, and/or hosts involved, and do not necessarily reflect nor represent those of the production, associates, or broadcaster, or any of its employees. Production is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in the series available for viewing. The primary purpose of this series is to educate and inform. This series does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This series is available for private, non-commercial use only. The production, broadcaster, or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.